Hello, and welcome to the Human Quotient. While the world talks about AI, we talk about people. We believe that people and people capabilities, human and human skills, are going to be relevant and possibly more important in the days to come. And to discuss human capabilities and how they're evolving, we have Britt Provost today with us. Britt Provost is the Chief Human Resource Officer at Siteimprove. So, Britt, it's an absolute pleasure to have you today. So, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
What helps you, what drives you do what you do? Given your expertise in crafting people experiences, what has sparked your passion for revolutionizing HR and talent management?
Yeah, for sure. I think the journey is not necessarily what I would have expected. If you go and look at my background, I did my undergraduate degree in art history with a focus on anthropology. But I do think that's a really important part of what drove me to end up where I have. I was really inspired in particular by Margaret Mead, who was a cultural anthropologist, traveled a lot, um, really kind of sought to understand how cultures worked from the inside, and in being embedded in the culture. And honestly, I kind of think that HR has that same relativity. But I've done a lot of things from a career perspective. I've obviously spent the last probably 20 years really focused on HR, but I've done nonprofit and I've been focused on fundraising and financial management and those kinds of things that I think kind of tied to where I've come to. And also, I went back to school and got my master's in business administration. And I've got to tell you, it was a little overwhelming to go back into that program after being an art history undergraduate. I just didn't have some of the math and the quantitative experiences. So it felt like a really good stretch and a really good opportunity for me to learn more. And I think, throughout that journey of mine, I think you can see that kind of that continuous learning has been such an important part of who I am and what I believe. And I spend a lot of my time that is not working with MBA programs because I think I'm really inspired by that learning.
You are also deeply involved in mentoring people, and you're part of mentoring programs that often focus on empowering individuals to maximize their worth, maximize their potential. When you look at those individuals, what are some qualities, what are attributes that you look for when you say choosing a right mentor to guide?
Sure. Look, I think at the baseline, it's about chemistry. It's about whether or not you have a connection point with that person that you're looking to have the mentorship relationship with. There's a lot of different ways to look at it. You can have reverse mentoring where people with a lot of experience are trying to understand, different views on the world. You can think about it as sponsorship too within an organization. So there are a bunch of different frames that you have to think about when you're thinking about what the mentoring relationship is overall, but it all starts with chemistry. And one of the things I always tell people in terms of finding a great mentor is looking for somebody that's iconic to you, somebody that's had a journey that you admire, that there are things you'd like to learn from them. And the best place to start is having a conversation about how did you get from this part to this part of your career? And that really opens up the conversation and you can see whether or not there's a match for you. I also encourage people don't just have one mentor. Think about your personal board of directors. Think about what purpose each of those mentors might play in terms of your career growth. And so there are people that have kind of a short-term responsibility in that way, where they're in an organization and maybe you're going through an onboarding kind of journey. And so you may have an onboarding mentor. But then you may also have a mentor that you have a really long-standing relationship with. It could be somebody that used to be your manager, for example, but you've moved on into a different kind of relationship with that person. The last thing I'll say is I just don't ever believe that the person that you're reporting to, your people leader, is ever going to be your mentor. You can learn a lot from those folks, but it's a really different responsibility. And they're kind of gatekeepers in some ways to your career. So you've got to think about mentorship as a safer space that is not in that relationship that you might have with a people leader.
Can you share a personal anecdote from your experience where mentorship has played a pivotal role in your own career? And how has that shaped your understanding of your own worth?
Yeah. Look, I've been really fortunate throughout my career to have a number of people that have sort of taken a risk on me. or given me the opportunity to grow within various roles. I do think of a specific situation in particular where I was working with a leader. I was actually their HR business partner, and it was a senior executive in sales and marketing. And at the same time, what I didn't realize is they were also advocating for me in a different way. And so as I got promoted into a different leadership level, I actually went to this particular leader for advice. I was having a tough time personally. I was trying to figure out how I was going to make it all work. And it opened the door for a different kind of conversation, a different kind of mentorship conversation, where this leader talked to me about how do you get through hard times? How do you get through moments where you're expected to sort of be steady in the workforce, but you got a bunch of crazy stuff going on in your life or whatever that is? And he had had an injury. I had had different kind of things going on, but that relationship was super, super important to me in that moment. And the other thing that came out throughout those conversations of mentorship and coaching and support was also how much this particular individual advocated for my promotion. So he felt personally responsible for me as a leader to do well because he was one of the people that advocated for me to move forward.
And we all need those friends.
Yeah, but it was kind of it was also a little bit of tough love, if I'm honest with you, because he, in moments where I was like, "Hey, I can't do this. It's too hard," or whatever, he's like, I've advocated for you. You represent me." And so I think we can't forget in these moments that there are a lot of people that have like quietly said things and are supporting us, but we also represent them because they've taken the risk on us.
There is a very funny anecdote in the mythology is about a lord who didn't know his powers, and somebody had to tell him their entire life story, and then he has an epiphany that okay, I am super powerful. So it is another. It's kind of like that. So yes,
Well, that's the ultimate, imposter syndrome story, right?
yes.
We all have it, and I think, no matter where you are, you always just wonder, "Hey, am I ready for this next step?" And there's a lot of self-reflection that goes into that. So, yeah, it's kind of the iconic hero's journey in its own way within your career.
So moving to the next question, you spoke about anthropology. So your advocacy for HR anthropology, no, it underscores the importance of understanding the cultural nuances within organizations. Say, for example, currently at Siteimprove, how do you approach the task of understanding the cultural dynamics?
Yeah. I would say it's even more challenging at Siteimprove because we have hubs in the Seattle area and Minneapolis in the United States. We also have a significant commercial hub in London. And we have another office that's really focused on products and development in Copenhagen, so in Denmark. And so we've got a lot of different cultural dynamics to be aware of. A lot of it has to do, I'd say, particularly with work style. You have very different work styles when you look across American culture, Danish culture, British culture. And then we've got a bunch of folks that are from all kinds of different places, depending on which office that we're talking about. So I think being really thoughtful about what's the communication flow? How do people have the opportunity to understand what we're doing? We spend a lot of time very much focused on bringing the group together in terms of an all hands. We also do this thing called coffee corners where people are allowed to ask their own questions. They send them in advance, but also do it in the moment. And I think that helps from a cultural perspective because I think it gives people time, especially when English is not a first language, to think about how we operate using the English language, but it gives people the opportunity to think about questions in a different sort of way. And I think particularly when you're dealing with cultural dynamics, you've got to remember that people in the moment, it may not be so easy for everybody in the moment. And that also doesn't just have to do with culture, that has to do with style. People that have more of an introverted preference often want time to think about things and to be able to write them down. So I think being really multimodal in terms of how you communicate and reinforce, and then be able to come back and collect feedback from people. We do surveys, obviously, like most organizations do, to look at how we're doing from an engagement perspective and a transformation perspective. And that's always a great way to get feedback as well, because it's a little less pointy, because people have the opportunity to submit it anonymously. And then I would also say that for anybody that's going into this kind of work, being thoughtful about the cultural differences. There are a lot of different ways. There's a lot of different resources to look at. But most of it is talking to people, spending time, building that kind of track record of trust. All those things I think really matter when you're dealing with multicultural environments.
Your involvement in projects focusing on connection and purposes. Or I remember the conversation that we had when we first spoke. Finding purpose and connection at workplace is really intriguing. In your experience, how do meaningful connections and a sense of purpose contribute to employee engagement and overall organizational success?
Well, I think purpose is such an important part of how we're driven as humans to do what we do. We spend so much time working. And so engaging with people that share that purpose, or engaging with a product like ours that's focused on accessibility and making the web a more accessible place, I think is another way where people can find connection and commonality. We do a lot of work with an organization called Imperative. We do something called Peer Connect. And they have an amazing process that we've built kind of together, which is this idea of doing a purpose assessment and finding people, bringing people together. It's not mentoring in the way that we were just talking about, but it's more of like a peer connection opportunity because you don't always know the people that you're working with. And that is entirely managed on kind of shared understanding of purpose. All kinds of different things drive us in terms of what motivates us to do our best. And being really clear about that and kind of boiling it down to, our value system or however you want to look at it, becomes just another really important part of connection. I do think most humans are driven by purpose. And we're finding generationally that as people come into the workforce, this Gen Z in particular, this idea of doing work that's really focused on purpose becomes even more top of mind and meaningful to this generation in terms of what they want to do and what they want to achieve with their careers.
Yeah. And again, it takes me back to the conversation that we had. Both purpose and connection, it has a positive impact on any type of longevity, whether it is life or it is workplace.
The piece I'm also incredibly passionate about is who do you work for? Who's your people leader? Is your people leader helping you feel like you're making contribution and impact to the work you do? So what you're doing and how you're doing it. Are they role modeling those behaviors that you want to see? That relationship between employee and people leader is just it's profoundly important.
Yeah, and see, and all of these things, what you're saying is so clearly visible if you observe people at workplaces. I run a very small startup based out of Bangalore, but if I have people who have been with me for the last 4 years, and one of the things that you talk about is who do you work for and who do you work with, right? And possibly also the sense of comfort and trust that is built around that relationship. So, how do you define authentic leadership, and what principles do you strive to embody as a leader?
So authentic leadership is super hard. It requires vulnerability. You can't just have it be, none of this is perfection in terms of the way that you're going to interact day to day. You're going to have moments where you don't do your best. You're going to have people working for you when they have moments where they don't do their best. But I think it's that agreement and that interaction where you agree to come together and have honest conversations and talk about where you're at. People leadership is a privilege. It's something that it's not an easy job. Sometimes I say, people leadership is 90% pain and 10% pure magic because, you're always missing each other sometimes with things. And, it's easy to talk about getting the work done, but it's also really hard when you're dealing with the humanity of all of it and trying to get through it. So authentic leadership to me is about being real, about being as straightforward and honest as you can. I kind of call it living a clean life. So I don't have to make stuff up. I can remember what I'm doing. And I think it's about holding each other accountable. But at the end of the day, the other thing I believe about leadership is I do three things. I'm responsible to help make sure funding happens for my team. So we do the things we've got to do. So I've got to go battle, for the budget and do those things. That's my job. My other job is making sure that I get rid of all of the noise. And so anything that needs escalation or it's a roadblock or whatever else, I have a responsibility to take care of that. And then I have a really sincere responsibility, which I think is part of the authenticity, to make sure I care about your career. What are you adding every year to your LinkedIn? What kind of experiences are you getting that are going to make you stronger for the things you want to go do? What are the skills that I can help you get? And in those moments where it's really, really hard, how am I super supportive to get you through to get to the next place? So none of this is easy stuff. And I think we are really, really, really taxing a lot of our people leaders right now with so much responsibility. And we just can't over overestimate how hard it is to do work in the world that we're in right now with so many distractions. And one of my biggest beliefs is that people leadership will become more and more important, even in a world with AI, because I think AI is going to radically change the way we work, but I think it's going to make things more efficient in a different way. It's not going to take away from the magic that has to happen to get things done. And somebody has to train AI to think about the questions that we want them to, what we want it to answer. And so that probably will mean that more focus will be on this soft skill of authentic leadership and people leadership, because that's the way we're going to head.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And what we believe in is that, oh, and this has happened across generations. Every time there is a technological innovation, people have to develop the right skills to augment the skills that AI can bring. And every time there is a technological innovation, people and people's capabilities become all the more important. When I'm very sure, when if I take a banking example, when there were ledgers, if you make a mistake in the ledger, you can rub it out and you can correct it.
You can see it, but yeah. But look, Chat GPT is not going to replace storytelling. It's certainly gonna help you construct. I probably will never write a job description again. I'll probably never write my own poetry. I'll probably push it through an AI system. But what I will tell you is that information has to come to me, and the way I order it, and the way I tell it, and the way I share it, however you wanna think about that, that's still a human responsibility. And part of what I believe people leadership is it is about storytelling. It's about where we're going and how we go there together. And AI is not gonna replace that.
Absolutely, absolutely. We have heard a lot about things that you do at Siteimprove, the Culture Compass program. What exactly is Culture Compass, and how does it serve as a valuable tool for yourself and the HR industry?
Yeah, it's an interesting, comment because or and question for us because we've spent a lot of time thinking about, again, where we're headed and how to get people to follow us. Fundamentally, we're a different company than we were 3 years ago, so we felt like it was a really important imperative for us to put pen to paper, to talk about what we believe about the experience, what we believe the arrangement is between us as the company and what we're responsible to do, and what we believe that the community of employees, and we use the word community really seriously, what the community employees are responsible to do as part of that interaction. We're kind of like a neighborhood or a bunch of neighborhoods, and thinking about what does it mean to be good neighbors in that space. So a lot of what I think we've been talking about over the course of last year, we went ahead and we codified into the Culture Compass. So Culture Compass probably has a couple different pieces. It's what the ELT kind of thought were some of the guiding principles. We know there's no map to create some of the things we're doing. SaaS is always, a kind of an adventure. And so we wanted to acknowledge that it was an adventure. We wanted to acknowledge that it was a journey, but we wanted to give some materials for people to figure out how to kind of understand where they were and where we were headed and how we were going to do that together. It's evolving, so there's like more to come from this. And I guess the last thing that I'll say is I'm very opposed to this idea of culture fit. I think it's a very yucky way to think about how you're going to interact as a community member. So we wanted to be really specific about a persona that we thought would do really well here at Site Improve and would really enjoy the work. And we call that persona the Pathfinder persona. And the Pathfinder persona has capabilities like agency and problem solving and accountability and resilience that tie into what will make the journey here really, really exciting for somebody. So we know when we're out there talking to people about, hey, come work here, I think we can be much more explicit about what we think a good understanding of kind of the adventure is going to be and why you might like it and why you might not like it, if you're going to sign up with us. And so I'm proud of the work There's a lot more to do, but I love the fact that all of it is grounded in this career framework that we've been building that talks about, hey, here's your job, here's your role, but here's the opportunity to grow.
Absolutely. And the one thing that I believe in is that everybody at the end of the day has responsibility towards themselves and their families. They owe growth to themselves. They owe their professional and personal accomplishments to themselves, if nobody else. Right? It is our duty to grow as people, as professionals, to achieve what professional growth. And when people come and talk to me, that Sudhanshu, hey, this is the kind of journey that I want to have, or say somebody works in my team and they come to me and say that, hey, this is the kind of growth that I'm looking at, even if it is in monetary terms. I say, and even if I don't have the capacity possibly to match that, the kind of conversation I have is I tell them very clearly that, hey, I respect that you are thinking of how you need to grow, and that's the first step that you have taken, and you have all the right in the world to put a premium on what capabilities you bring to the table. You believe that life is best lived with purpose. We spoke about purpose before as well. So what is the driving force behind your own sense of purpose, and how does it influence your approach to decision making and leadership at Siteimprove?
It's really interesting because I would say that it's probably evolved over my career, but I'd say probably over the last 10 years in particular. Look, I feel really privileged to get to do what I get to do professionally. I didn't necessarily think that this is where I would have ended up. Obviously, art history. I probably would be more likely to be a professor or something like that. Um, but I just have, so I think I approach my career and my work as it's a gift. You know, I definitely, want to do things that add purpose and that impact people. It's probably this idea of creating a legacy. Who are you bringing along? Who are you bringing up? How many other heads of HR can I help mentor and get across the line to be leaders? That is super fulfilling for me to see people's personal growth. But I think it all comes from a place, honestly, of gratefulness to get to do this work, to get to experience different cultures, to get to do the things I do. And I guess that sense of gratefulness and purpose is something that really, really drives me. Um, you know, who knows what the future will hold? I'm getting to a place where I probably am going to start thinking about the next chapter of career and work. But I hope that as I make that transition, that this idea of gratefulness, purpose, and honestly, legacy in terms of who are you helping get into a place that absolutely fulfills them will probably still be part of what I believe and what drives me.
If you help a professional become a better version, even if that delta is very small, it has a profound impact on multiple facets of their lives. We help people, professionals, companies think about people, capabilities, talent in a better way. And if we can make our small delta, you mentioned practicing digital detox over weekends. How do you think this practice contributes to you maintaining a healthy work-life balance?
So I'm not doing as good as at it as I have in the past, but what I try to do is over the weekends, particularly kind of Friday through Saturday, looking at how do I get rid of my phone? How do I, put it in a different place? So moving away. Like I love to read, and a lot of times I read off my phone, but then I get distracted by all the things. So it's putting the phone away and thinking about how to have a moment where you're reflecting in a different way. It's interesting because one of the other things that's kind of part of my practice that really helps me kind of shake it off is I love to take pictures, but I'm also taking them with my phone. So I've moved away and I'm trying to go back to kind of an old school camera. So it's thinking about we are so tied to this device, and it is so distracting, and it doesn't allow us to have a single thread. So for me, the digital detox is about how do I have a single thread that I'm focused on. I think it's so much better for my brain. It's so much better for sleep. It's so much, just kind of having a regular practice. I'm trying to do it throughout the day too. But it's hard. It's hard in our digital world. And it's hard when you work in a global business. where everybody's pinging you at different times. We've got to solve this because I think we're too reliant on this device. And we've got to go back to a little bit of just breathing and having a meal with people where our phones are not on the table.
So one book or podcast that has influenced your approach to HR?
I would recommend Squiggly Career. It is by Tupper and Ellis. I think it's Helen Tupper and Sarah Ellis. It is a fabulous way to think about career growth that is not in a straight line.
If you could swap your roles with any of the employees within your organization, who would it be and why?
I would love to be part of my chief marketing officer's team. I don't know where she'd put me to work, but Isa, if you're watching this, I'm available and we could talk about brand. I would love to learn about demand generation. So that would be fun.
A mantra or motto that you live by while tackling complex HR challenges?
It's actually a life motto in general, which is everything is figure outable.
I think I know the answer to the last one. If you weren't in HR, what profession do you think you would excel in, given your skill sets?
There are two places, and honestly, it's something I'm thinking about for kind of the long term. I think I could either go back and be a professor, which I would love. I would also think about therapy, being a therapist.
So, Britt, over the last 30, 40 minutes, it's been an absolute privilege. Thank you so much for taking out time for this. The AntWalk philosophy is from learning from people who have been there and done that. What is your message to the HR leaders who are looking to step into your shoes?
It's going to be kind of broad, but I'm going to say go for it. And what I mean by this specifically is sometimes you have to do something a little bit more creative or non-traditional. I think that the HR workforce should think about broadening their horizons, always aligning to the business, but don't be afraid to try something new.
So, Britt, thank you so much for being on this Human Quotient podcast and bringing the human element of the HR into it. And as I said, it's been an absolute privilege talking to you. So thank you so much.